Hey everyone, so this is lesson 5 and this is a really important one. We're going to be talking about the buffer size, and the buffer size accounts for how much load you're putting on the CPU, and this is really important to remember what settings you need for the kind of task you're going to be doing in Logic. So I'm not going to get into the specific details about this right now because it's quite a long topic and there's quite a lot to discuss, but I just want you to remember the settings that you need for specific tasks. So if you're recording, you want a low buffer size, and if you're mixing, you want a high buffer size. So if we go into Logic's preferences and we go into audio, you'll see the input-output buffer size here, and if you're recording, you never really want to go above 128 samples. I'll often record on 64 or 32 samples, but the more you increase it, you'll see the latency, the round trip. You see here the resultant latency, it'll go up the higher the buffer size, and that just messes with your head when you're recording because it's just taken too long to get the output back into your headphones so you can hear what's going on. So if you watch, I'll put it on 32 and it's a 6.8 millisecond round trip, and that just helps so much with recording because you're getting no latency and you can really dig in and groove with it and it'll sound really good. So the main problem when recording with a low buffer size is you can't use that many plugins because the load on the CPU is just too much. If you look at the CPU meter here, I'm not even playing any audio and it's spiked the CPU meter, which means the amount of plugins that I'm using is just causing too much load on the CPU because there's quite a lot of plugins on this project. So if we go back to preferences, it's probably best to use a buffer size of 128 if you're using more plugins than is ideal for when you're recording, and this will just lessen the load on the CPU and it's not too bad of a resultant latency round trip. So as opposed to when you're recording and you want to use a low buffer size, when you're mixing you want to use as high buffer size as you can get away with, really. And this is because you want to use you probably want to use a lot of plugins, and this is going to put a lot of strain on the CPU. So you're going to need a high buffer size for this. So if you put it on 1024 samples and just click apply changes, you should see the CPU meter drop, and this is exactly what you want because you want as much processing power for the plugins as you can get, just so you can put as many effects on as you want and just manipulate the sound as much as you can. And you're going to want to use a high buffer size for mixing. So it's worth mentioning as well that if you use too low of a buffer size when you're mixing, your project will probably crash. It won't do it here, but I want to show you what happens to the CPU meter when I'm using a low buffer size and I've got this many plugins on. I haven't even pressed play and it's already spiked it so much. So if I shut this and press play, you can just see how much load that is on the CPU, and that's not what you want because the project will crash. So this can be a bit annoying when you're recording if you have a lot of plugins on and you have to keep switching back and forth between a low buffer size for recording and a higher buffer size for when you want to play back and you want to hear how it sounds with the plugins on. But there is a bit of a workaround for this. So if you go into the record menu and you see this function low latency mode, this can really help. So when you're playing back with a lot of plugins on, you can maintain a high buffer size and hear how it sounds with the plugins on. But when you go to record a take, if you just go into this record menu and select low latency mode, it kind of mimics a low buffer size, which gives you low latency for when you're recording. And then when you go to play back, you just untick the box and you can maintain a higher buffer size to play it back with a lot of plugins on, and it's kind of the best of both worlds. You do, however, have to remember that if you do have low latency mode on, it does turn off your sends to your buses. So if you're relying on any reverbs coming from a send to a bus, you're not going to be able to have that. So I just want to show you how to get these CPU and hard drive meters up. These can be really helpful to gauge what's going on with the CPU and to kind of tell off the bat what buffer size you're using if you kind of forget without having the audio menu up. So if you just control click on an empty space in the control bar at the top and click on customize control bar and display, it will bring this menu up. And then if you just go and tick this box, the performance meter box, the CPU and hard drive performance meter box, you'll see that it disappears, and then there it will be in the top. Alright everyone, that's it for lesson 5. I know this is a bit of a boring subject, but it's really helpful, and nobody likes it when their project crashes and you haven't saved and you lose all your work. So if you know these important tips, you can just save yourself so much time and so much frustration. So I'll see you next time in lesson 6, where we'll actually get into some music.